Hey everybody, this is Elizabeth from Silvernest Homeschooling, mom of four, homeschooling for 12 years, and this is what is left on my curriculum shelf that I use when I am not using something for the year. So for example, this year we're studying world history, but I like to keep things for classes I'm going to teach again, since having four kids, you cycle through some stuff. And so anyway, I am on to shelf 2. This is shelf 1, and I did shelf half down there of what was on there. But this shelf has a mix of curriculum and some books that we use for Washington State history, which I'll be teaching next year, as well as potentially some just overall history books and some old curriculum. So here we go. We're going to go through here. We've got Walking Washington's History, this book by Judy Bentley. I'm not sure they have these for other states, but in this case, she went around to a lot of the famous, more popular and more historically significant towns and takes us through the history of each one, but in order of Washington's history itself. So we start down in Vancouver, because there's a lot of Washington history standard down there, and then takes us through. We've done a couple of these with my middle child. We thought we would do more different field trips using this. There is one I know for hiking our state history as well, and she really prefers the cities, but we just didn't get out very much. She's heavily involved in after school curriculars, and so but I'm hoping that my youngest and I get to do more of these next year. So that is why it is still on our shelf. And then we also have this book was one that I used to learn to read, so the Little White House series. And no, I'm not this old, but yes, this was mine when I was a kid. And so I keep it on the history shelf because if somebody was curious to see what life was like, and especially from a kid's point of view, they could actually choose to read and research this kind of story and why people had this kind of book printed, etc., if they wanted to. And so that's kind of why I keep it there, but it's mostly still my collection for nostalgia. We also have for Washington State history, Birds of the Puget Sound region, just to look up different birds when we go out and about. Every child is slightly different, so I do teach Washington history a little bit differently for each one, depending on how and what their interests are. For regular American history, I use The Outsiders for high school, and it deals with gangs and was written by a teenager, basically set in the 50s, and there is a movie based off of it as well, which is what this cover is from. So you could do a link. There is language in here, but I feel like in high school, that's a time to sort of deal with some of the raw issues, and the challenge of why this book is still relevant today is it's the question of how do I fit in and who is my family. So, and sacrifice. There's a huge amount of sacrifice in that book. Also, one of the other books we use for American history, Washington Irving was one of the first authors in America, if not the first fiction author. And so Rip Van Winkle is one I read in high school, and so that's why we have this copy. I don't know that I've ever used The Legend of Sleepy Hollow with the kids, but definitely Rip Van Winkle. Also for American history, this book is really special to me. We live in a Navy town, and when I first moved here, I met a man named Glenn Lane, and he actually was at Pearl Harbor. And when I found this book for my daughter who loves history to read, I was blown away and excited to find that my friend Glenn, who was one of the first people to believe in my dreams to study theater, is actually one of the characters in the comics in the middle. And so I'm really excited. I had to buy my own copy, even though these were available at our local library. I wanted to have it myself. And so, yes, we will use this for American history for middle school or high school. Also for American history, Bells on Their Toes, which is the second book to Cheaper by the Dozen, written by the kids of this couple that is all based on a true story that got married and had 12 children. And in this book, there are 11 left, and the husband has died. And so it's all about how the mom in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s kept her family together. She was really, really smart. Going back and studying her as a person is very inspiring, but she's the reason we have a butter section in our kitchen and the idea of the triangle in a kitchen, the golden triangle. So she added a lot of value to what we use every day, but because she was a woman, it was really hard for her, even though she and her husband had the same degrees, And in this book, the kids chronicle all the funny, hilarious hijinks that they get up to, but also how they were able to stay together and their mom getting work and being able to feed the family and not split them up. So very inspiring, very funny. There are a couple of movies based on Cheaper by the Dozen. And I would say that I was even inspired by them in some of my homeschooling, though they did not homeschool. Other books for American history, George Washington's Spy Master. And a field guide to American history. This one looks so boring, so not sure I'm going to drop everything, how much I will be able to get my kids. So sad how a cover makes a difference. If I assign it, they have to read it, but I do try, since I have so many, to pick things. So in this case, I probably would choose sections and then that I thought my kids it'd be valuable to them, or I thought they'd be interested in, and I would just use a sticky note and mark that page. We'll see. Also, we have The Pit and the Pendulum by Edgar Allan Poe, another early American author. Wrote a lot of poetry and one of the very first, if not the first, murder mystery writer before even Sherlock Holmes. So we have read books, short stories by him and poems by him already, but from high school American Lit and also used for American history if wanted to. The Doctor Wore Petticoats, Women's Physicians of the Old West. I have a feeling that my youngest will enjoy this. And I think had my oldest that is already, so I have 2 left to go through American high school, American history. I think I had the one that did this series with me read part of this. But I found it after my oldest had already finished. I also love this old Sears Roebuck catalog book of what they actually saw. And a lot of the old books will talk about poring over the Sears Roebuck catalog. And I remember like deep diving over one of these even when I was a kid and just enjoying all the price differences and all the things you could buy. Again, you don't need any of these books to homeschool. These are just for you to get some ideas, or even looking at them might go, no, that will not work for my child. All right. This is one of my main books I use for Washington State history, Exploring Washington's Past, A Road Guide to History. And as you can see again, what I did for the last child was I sticky noted the pages and the sections I wanted them to read, specifically about where they have lived, like our island that we live on, and the areas around us, and places that she has been to, so that she's able to connect history to memory. We've also used Encyclopedia of Women in the United States. Again, I sticky noted the actual women I wanted my oldest to study when she was she's my oldest daughter, when she was studying this for high school. So we will use this again for high school American history. This one we've had since the kids were little, and they've gone through it off and on. I often have them use it for when they're filling out pages. But I really like, if they're like, okay, what's your state bird? What's your this? What's your that? Getting to know a little bit about different states in our nation. And so I think it's a beautiful book and a way to explain just visually those things. And so we've had this as a resource since almost the very beginning. Pull it out whenever we're doing something. All right, Heroines of the American Revolution. This book was fantastic. My girls asked if we could keep it. I thought they would find it a little boring, but it's very inspirational stories that we had never heard of before. And I have used it multiple times. We've done American history with them in elementary school and in middle school multiple times. We kind of cycle through hearing different parts and oops, I got scared there. Something fell over. Sorry guys. Again, I'm just a mom, not a professional, so I don't edit. Sorry. You'll get to get that jump with me. Anyway, founding mothers and just some really fun short stories that really happened and from a completely different point of view. So if you're looking for something like that, this one is a really, really good one. And I asked the girls, should we get rid of it when we were done? They're like, no, keep it. So, yep. And then we have, let me move these so nothing else surprises me. The Signers, the 56 stories behind the Declaration of Independence. They found this one to be more boring. Each person who signed the Declaration of Independence is listed here. And so we have read about a few of them. In my perfect world, I was going to read like one a day for a while or one a week or something, but I think we've only made it through maybe 10. So maybe this one was better. But if you're interested in something like this, then the stories were pretty short, but the artwork was a little boring. For middle school would be much better, but elementary school was a little bit boring. All right, these are my middle school botany from this year. So, and the teacher's guide to botany from Gather Round. We use this as a supplement. This was one of our absolute favorite units. I know I said that about psychology, but this year botany has been the A1, 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 A1. And so we loved it. We deep dived with my youngest. We had a ball. I know there's probably a lot of botany units that could be used. So maybe it's just we had never done botany with her, but to this level. But yeah, we loved it. All right. We also have Energy, which we used this year, and she did that one on her own. Oftentimes you read the teacher's manual to them and then they answer in their own, but she decided to do that one herself. And then this one is Guest Hollow's American History Year 2 Workbook Answer Key. So I have used for 2 of the kids American History, Guest Hollow American History. It's a Guest Hollow is a curriculum made by a mom, and it has a lot of books. It's a huge pile of books, and then it also has projects and cooking things, and you kind of go through and select what you want them to do. It's kind of open and go in some respects. Like they have this, you print this off, and then this is the correcting sheet. So you would print this off and these would all be empty, and the kids read what is assigned, and then they have even more books they could read. And so I think the American History, the second one, is really good. I find a lot of the books from world history, we tried that one, they were way too mature or way off base. Like the history was either incorrect, in my opinion, or my kids' opinions from the other stuff they've studied, or else they were like retellings. That was probably the one that bothered me the most. The incorrectness was just, we do a lot of reading of history so we can find those fallacies, so that wasn't horribly bad, but I cannot recommend the world history. I felt like it was way too mature. The stuff they were studying was not appropriate for a high school student, especially since maybe it was designed for a senior, but mine was a freshman or an 8th grader trying to read it. It was horrible. Had to throw out so many of the books. And then some of the books were like modern retellings of historical things, which since I'm more of a, read the books from the time period that were written in the time period and discuss the realities of why that was created, it really didn't sit well with me or my daughter. She is my avid reader. She loves to read, and she hated the majority of what we went through. And so we did not use world history with my other daughter. Instead, we're using Knotgrass this year for her. But we did use the American History Year 2. They have Year 1 and Year 2, and Year 2 covers from the Civil War or right after the Civil War to modern times. And I thought it did a really, really good job. And the first 2 kids, the books aren't necessarily easy reads. I mean, you're reading some, challenging stuff, but nothing the way that the world history was. And plus the world history didn't even cover Africa after like 1890s, which I found, anyway, yeah, sorry. That's not this rant. Love you all. If you love Guest Hollow, that's awesome. Please enjoy your Guest Hollow. It didn't work for us. Everybody has to do what they love. The White House, Pop-Up Nation. So we've used this history book as well, and it was a gift to us. Study American history, Robert Sabuda. His work is amazing. Not safe for little kids, which it's made for, is kind of a challenge because this really is a piece of art. We also have Singing Down the Road, which is an old American classic songs. So we can sing, Sweet Betsy from Pike. Again, we've got some musicians in the family, so it's kind of fun sometimes to look at the American classic songs. In fact, Knotgrass, the American history that they have for the elementary school, which we also have used, has a whole CD of songs from the past, which has been really fun to listen to. All right, this one is Captive of Friendly Cove, based on the Secret Journals of John Jewett. We use this for our Washington State history. It's a very mature graphic novel. Definitely 8th grade is fine, but for our family, but yeah, definitely not a elementary school read. And then we also have The Essential Emily Dickinson, which we read for American history, and the poetry. Again, I marked just a few of them. Mice and Men is also for our American history high school unit. This one is part of the guest hollow, and we're talking about the 30s and the Great Depression. The Raven and Other Poems, again, Edgar Allan Poe. Seven of the Monkeys, I have used this for American history, especially middle school. I read this, I think, in 6th grade, and it's about a boy who's trying to go find some escaped monkeys in the Ozarks. The Egg and I has been one that my daughter read for American. You could use this for Washington State history. Betty McDonald also wrote the Mrs. Pigwiggle series. This is a autobiography, there we go, of her life when her first husband decided he wanted to be an egg farmer, and they live on the peninsula here in Washington, and it's got some good humor in it, but does a good job of describing what life was like back then. And there's a very funny movie that isn't quite based in the book with Fred McMurray and Claudette. So I can't remember her last name right now. All right, we also have The Rock and Gem, Other Treasures of the National World. I guess this is on here because I wasn't sure how else to put it. It's a nice tall shelf, but we have used this one quite a bit in our science classes. And then we have Traditional Irish Tin Whistle Tutor. My husband plays the tin whistle, and these are available in case the kids also want to learn. Traveler's Guide to Ancient Greece, obviously in the wrong place, but I do like these traveler's guides. They're kind of a mix between comic and facts, pretty fast and easy to read. And if you're trying to get through a lot of history, this can be a good way to do it. The Mystery Writer's Handbook. Again, I have quite a few writers in the house, and just found this somewhere for free and thought it would be nice to have some other writers, probably, outdated as far as modern publishing standards go, but could be useful. My daughter she's interested in being an author, and she has read some other writing books, just not that one. She's not interested in mysteries. My second copy of Hot Fudge Monday. I talked about this in my part 1 video of this series. And but basically a great middle school grammar book. So if you're interested, go check that out. It's Bound for Oregon. This counts for Washington State history because they used the Oregon Trail to get to Washington, and Oregon Territory was both places. And it's based I think it's based on a true story. But anyway, it does really hit hard, but good. But my daughter laughed. She goes, "Oh man, I played the Oregon Trail," which is the card game version, not the computer game version, so many times, Mom. It felt like I already read and knew all this information. So anyway, she probably won't be reading this one again for Washington State history because she has already read it. Edible Wild Plants, North American Field Guide. This one was my husband's, and it's great should have pulled this out for botany. But anyway, we will definitely be using it in our upcoming life skills class this spring, as well as we may or may not use this for Washington State history, depending on her interest. And she is the one that likes to go out and adventure in nature, so that might be for that. Yeah, good. Got to have the right area. My dad tried to live off of the land one time in the 70s, but he had one from New England trying to live off Washington State, and it did not go well. All right, Washington Curiosities. Oh, there dropped something else. This one is little things, places you can go and see really random, strange things or interesting things in Washington. So great inspiration for field trips. Again, you don't need something like this. You could just use the internet, but I think we got it for free, or I picked it up at a library sale or something where I grabbed a bunch of books, and I dropped The Ever-Changing Evergreen, which is a little pamphlet. It actually does a good job of explaining a lot of our flora and fauna, and so it's a quick read for Washington State history. We also have Anna Botsford Comstock's Handbook of Nature Studies, which I have used before as part of my regular curriculum, especially when I was doing unit studies with the younger kids, and I would find something that would go along with what we were studying, such as cows or rabbits, and I would just read the whole section from there. You could do an entire unit study by just having this as your spine and then grabbing a pile of books from the library to go with it that were like all about butterflies or all about snails, or having those be like the adventure books and this one being the actual science. By canoe and sailing ship they came. This was written by a friend of mine, Dorothy Neal. She passed away many moons ago, but she loved to write. And I was so excited when I found this at another one of our library sales, and it tells the history in one of our island where we live. And so I picked that up for Washington State history. Not as much of a fan, my one daughter, but when I read it out loud to the other one, she was like, okay, it's okay. It's okay. Also, we have Our Washington, which is very 1950s, kind of tells the story of these kids that go on a field trip with or camping trip with their parents and what life was like back then. My daughter said she much preferred this one. And Women of the West, also used for Washington State history. And again, you can see where I tagged it, but it tells different stories of the women who helped found not just our state, but mostly our state. We also have Fort Clatsop, the story behind the scenery. We have been to Fort Clatsop. My youngest probably doesn't remember, so I probably will try to take her again. It's where Lewis and Clark stayed after they came across. And then the story of Mount St. Helens. And then Pioneer Women, Lives of Women on the Frontier. Again, tagged this one for Washington State history. This one is more like all across the West, not just here, but it does have some stories from here. And Sailing Home, the story of childhood at sea, which I found very appropriate living near the ocean. Again, Ted Rand, Gloria Rand, who I absolutely love. And this family actually homeschools at sea while they go and travel around and have adventures. That's based on what life was really like. Totem poles, small explanation of local Native American customs and why and what totem poles are. And then this is what I use for my kids to study Washington State. And I know they have these for every state. It is say that it's for younger grades, but I find it to be the perfect spine for us. That way they have something to do regularly. It has projects and things in it, like to make a salt dough map of their state and different things like that. So as you can tell, I use this and then a pile of books. That's how we teach Washington and go hopefully on more field trips. This series here, the credit card math by Life Skills. I've used these before with my kids. In 8th grade, I also make them do a money unit. I teach them money every year, but I make them do a specific money unit, and I use these life skills just to make sure that they have some practical math, like, shopping and discounts and things like that. We do that all the time, but I was amazed at how much work some of the kids do take to understand some of these concepts, and they think it's too easy, but then they're not focusing either. So anyway, there's those. There's also Foundations in Personal Finance that I've had available, but we haven't used yet, from Financial Peace University. We've talked about it. It's older, so some of the information is no longer as valid, but the principles are the same. I'm not sure I'll use that with her this year. Also, Understanding Money by Usborne. We have a couple of money books like this, and so they will read that in 8th grade. They also read Penny Candy, something to do with Penny Candy, I can't remember. Braver, Stronger, Smarter by Sissy Goth. This is an amazing book for not just overcoming worry and anxiety, but just getting some skills on how to handle life and to understand that when you're rescued from something, it reinforces your fear factor. But if you go and face it, and even if you survive, your brain marks that as a win. I think this book should be done by everybody. And so we will do this for 8th grade as well. This is the used book from one of my other daughters, so I won't show you much in there, but yeah. And then we also made my child, the last time they did 8th grade with Money Matters, was just turned into whole life skills the whole year. And I made her read this book, and oh, was she cranky. But there were some things in here that were useful. And the way I had her read it was, I skipped a couple chapters, but in general, I had her read the whole thing in bite-sized pieces, and partly just to beef up her reading skills, and partly for her to discuss with me whether she thought that the person did a good job or a bad job teaching the skills, and if she actually learned anything. All right, that was super long because it's a super big shelf, but I hope that was helpful. Some insights into how we homeschool and parent. Love this book. Wish I'd used it more. Might use it more for this next upcoming year. I hope so. But again, we will be decluttering many, many things when the kids move out of homeschooling with us. But I will keep this book and probably put it on my on my shelf for my grandkids because I do love Gloria and Ted Wren. I hope you are having a great day. I hope this video was enjoyable to have on in the background, maybe inspirational, or maybe you're like, yes, I'm so glad that I have decluttered all my books and I don't have to deal with so much. We will talk to you soon, and thanks for joining us.